Hello, Jared. Hi.
Hey, hey, Ryan, how are you?
Oh, we got you. So the speech last night was watching it, and the president said, "We're going to release all this information, whitehouse.gov. Go look at the information for yourself."
Yeah.
Do you get a chance to, I guess, find any revelations, anything in there that stands out to you that would be important for people to know?
Well, listen, I think the top line figure that the president was trying to make is that the voter information of an awful lot of Americans, more than 200 million, was hacked or ascertained by the Chinese government. That I think on its face is very alarming to a lot of people. That being said, there still are a lot of questions because the president did not go as far as to say that China was successful in kind of its attempts to sway the American vote. A 2021 intelligence assessment concluded that China considered and made preparations to interfere with the election and then did not actually do that. And it's also notable that a lot of this voter information for folks is available, sometimes publicly, just on the internet through your state's elections website, and sometimes through purchase. That's how campaigns, for instance, target voters. It's how pollsters target voters, is you need to know who's a registered voter, right? And so the information isn't necessarily hard to get in a lot of circumstances. So, I think that certainly the president made this case to say we need to tighten the security. We need to make sure that this data can't be used inappropriately. But at the same time, a lot of this is public record, and folks are going to have access to it for purposes well beyond, I think, just targeting voters.
Yeah, and part of it, the capability, what China is capable of doing. I think we heard some similar arguments when it came to Russia beforehand. But I mean, we had some pretty solid evidence that Russia was actually doing things, buying ads on Facebook to try to get people to hate each other. So it
Yeah,
sounds like, at least for right now, it doesn't sound like China may have had a direct impact on it, but had the capability of impact.
I think that's the crux. And I think the other thing that the president was making the case for is that this threat was far more serious than the public was let in on. He made the allegation that this threat assessment that he declassified last night was kept from him, was kept from other administration officials, was kept from the public, that there was a concerted effort, he said, by the deep state to bury this assessment. And that is where he says he wants accountability, directing the CIA director, the FBI, these other intelligence agencies, the director of national intelligence, to investigate who was responsible for burying it. The DHS Secretary, Mark Wayne Mullen, did a follow-up news conference this morning here in the White House complex, and suggested that, some of these folks may still be in government, some of them may not, but that they are starting that process now to try and identify that. And that's the other kind of element of this is there's a lot of data, a lot of information that was kind of thrown out last night that still requires a lot of nuance. The other big number that the president put out last night was the more than 220,000 non-citizens who he says are registered to vote, right? There are a lot of deceased people that remain on voter rolls. What Mark Wayne Mullen said today is that, those are the property of each state. And so in some cases, states have been very cooperative and handed over voter rolls, and the federal government is able to kind of compile these lists and databases and run it across their own files. And in some cases, states are not cooperating. And it's going to take a lot of time, he said, to potentially kind of figure out, okay, we know the universe of non-citizens that we think are registered to vote. What we don't know is if any of them have ever attempted to vote, if any of them actually did cast a ballot. So again, a lot of questions about kind of the context of what the president revealed last night.
Something else I wanted to ask you about and get your take as a news guy, the networks that decided not to air a presidential address, that kind of surprised me a little bit. I guess when it comes to the context of elections, They're very hesitant in some ways when they look up claims from Donald Trump. So they say, we're just going to stay out of this, or purposely try to make it a point that we're not going to allow him to speak on this again for their airwaves. So, but this is a presidential address to the nation. And I think, okay, there's a certain amount of standard that goes with that, as in if you're of a network of public record, then you would almost feel like you're obligated to allow that address on your airwaves. You'd want to carry that. So what are your thoughts about the networks that decided to skip it?
Well, the argument you just made are the exact same arguments that the Obama and Biden administrations made when they had presidential primetime addresses that were not picked up by the networks. So this is not without precedent. Several years ago, President Obama made a speech about immigration reform that networks deemed to be more political in nature than kind of national importance. And so that was not carried live by an awful lot of networks. If you recall the threat to democracy speech that President Biden made in Philadelphia outside Constitution Hall, networks did not take that either. And in both cases, the administration pushed back and criticized those decisions.
Was the Biden speech, is that the one where they had like the red coloring in the background that made it look like a Nazi speech?
Yes,
is that the one?
Although I'll say, that's funny because I was there. I was in Philadelphia for that, covering it. And the view from where I was so different than what it looked like on TV, because I had like the full, right, because it was like red, white, and blue lighting.
Right.
And so I remember waking up the next morning saying, why are people making a big deal about the lighting? And then I saw the video and I was like, oh, that looked different than how I saw it. Okay.
It's played out differently on television.
Picture, not the zoom in on the president, which obviously a White House advance team should be cognizant of. But
right.
Yeah, but you're right. That speech, also a primetime address. Networks did not carry that. I'll also say this. I think that the primetime network speech is not maybe what it used to be. Right. Our media landscape's a lot different. So I think that Americans that wanted to view that speech had a lot of opportunities to do it. We carried it on Fox News Radio. I hope, we had some listeners that tuned in if they were away from a television or screen. But yeah, listen, I think that those are decisions that networks make, and there's always pushback from White Houses about those decisions when a network or multiple networks decide for one reason or another they don't want to give up prime time viewing for something like that.
Last question.
Also, I will say, fortunately, way above my pay grade.
One last thought here is at the end of the speech, you made a push for the Save America Act.
Yeah.
And the idea is one of the easiest ways to make sure we have honest elections is photo IDs and, making sure those that are eligible to vote are the ones that are actually voting. So he makes a pitch at the end. Here's all the documents you can go find online. Do you think anything's changed? Do you think that may have persuaded anyone, or is there still a long way to go when it comes to the Save America Act?
I don't think it would have changed a lot of minds, certainly on the Democratic side. The bigger problem in the Senate obviously has been with Republicans, right? It doesn't have nearly 60 votes. There is not an appetite to eliminate the filibuster on this. And there have been objections to the Save America Act by a number of Republicans, especially over the restrictions and limitations on mail-in voting. Every state handles mail-in voting differently. Sometimes it's a big part of the balloting. Sometimes it's a small part. But in a couple of Republican states, Alaska, for instance, it's a major way of people voting. And we've heard Lisa Murkowski say, listen, if we don't have mail-in voting, people are going to literally have to fly to their nearest polling place. This isn't like just getting in the car and driving downtown for a lot of these far-flung reaches in Alaska, right? And so the implementation of it, I think, remains a question that a lot of Republicans still have. I'll also say that what I have heard from an awful lot of election officials is that even if that were to pass today, which it won't, obviously, implementing it before the 2026 midterms will be almost impossible, given that those processes are already underway in states, right? Registration deadlines, applications for mail-in balloting, all of those things. So we'll see. I know that I think the main thrust of the speech was to make the case for the Save America Act, to be sure. I guess we'll find out in the weeks ahead if the math has changed, but I did not get the sense, in the initial kind of response from Republicans yesterday that there was a big kind of sea change in how a lot of these senators are viewing the Save America Act.
Jared, you're so good at explaining these things. And by the way, I name drop you. The last time I think we spoke, you said something that really cleared things up. We were talking about Iraq, and you said, okay, you essentially equated it to, we took out Hitler, now you're trying to deal with the SS. And I thought that was such a great analogy. I have name dropped you. I said, I was talking to Jared Halpern over at Fox News Radio, and he laid it out this way, and it made so much sense. Jared, I think you do a fantastic job. You do great work with Fox News Radio. People wanted to look you up. Where can they go?
I'm on X at Jared Halpern.
Perfect. Fox News Radio White House correspondent Jared Halpern. Thank you so much for joining us here in St. Louis.
Thank you.
I'm name dropping Jared Halpern. I feel cool doing it. I'm just saying. You're listening to the Annie Frey Show on 97.1 FM Talk.